The cameras clicked and the room buzzed as reporters filled the chamber, waiting for a heated session of the U.S. House to begin. Hakeem Jeffries, Minority Leader of the U.S. House of Representatives, stood at the podium with the confidence of a seasoned politician. His tie sharp, his tone sharper. With a smug grin, Jeffries began his opening remarks during a press conference meant to address border security. But what began as a political critique quickly turned into something far more controversial. The American people deserve to know the truth, Jeffries proclaimed. ICE has become a rogue agency under this administration. They behave more like armed vigilantes than enforcers of the law. Instead of compassion, they bring chaos. Instead of enforcing order, they operate with brutality. Reporters raised their eyebrows. A few murmured. Some typed more frantically. Jeffries went on, referring to the agents of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement as the muscle of Trump's xenophobic fantasies. His remarks were greeted by polite applause from a few progressive activists in attendance, but the atmosphere shifted. Even some of Jeffries' fellow Democrats looked uncomfortable. Then came the line that exploded across social media within minutes. ICE agents aren't heroes. They're stormtroopers in plain clothes, Jeffries said, and the time has come to hold them accountable for the harm they've caused in immigrant communities. Fox News immediately ran a headline. Jeffries compares ICE agents to Nazi-era troops. By lunchtime, conservative media and political pundits were ablaze. ICE agents across the country began flooding their union headquarters with calls of outrage. Many had risked their lives on the job, raiding cartel stash houses, breaking child trafficking rings, arresting violent offenders. And now they were being publicly smeared. Back at the White House, President Donald J. Trump was watching the conference live on a private television feed in the Oval Office. Sitting beside him was Vice President JD Vance, quietly observing. Trump didn't say much at first. He simply stared at the screen, arms crossed. Then he spoke. "Get me ICE leadership, today. I want them in the Roosevelt Room in an hour," Trump said, rising from his seat. "And get me everything on Jeffries, voting record, speeches, family donations. If he wants a war, he's got one." JD Vance nodded. He crossed the line. "The agents are furious. We can't let that slide." Within 45 minutes, ICE Director Tom Homan and senior agency leaders were seated in the Roosevelt Room. Cameras weren't allowed. Phones were placed in Faraday cages. But according to a staffer who later leaked details, what followed was one of the most intense conversations of the year. President Trump slammed a folder onto the table. This is a man who's never done a day of law enforcement. He wouldn't last 1 hour on the southern border. And yet he thinks he can mock the men and women keeping this country safe. Tom Homan nodded. "Mr. President, morale is already low. Our agents are furious. They want to respond through official statements, through public outreach. They're even talking about walking off duty in protest." "No walkouts," Trump said. "We don't abandon the mission, but you're going to get a national platform tomorrow. ICE is going to speak, and so am I. We're going to defend the badge." Then came the bombshell. "I'm flying to El Paso tomorrow morning, and I want cameras. I want ICE agents beside me, and I want one message delivered clearly. We will not allow our heroes to be smeared by political cowards." As staffers scrambled to organize the surprise visit, Trump's Twitter/X account lit up. Hakeem Jeffries just compared ICE agents to Nazis. Disgusting and shameful. These brave men and women put their lives on the line every day to keep America safe. I stand with ICE 100%. Hashtag Defend the Badge United States. That tweet alone had over 12 million views by midnight. And this was just the beginning. The desert air was thick with anticipation. Dozens of ICE agents, Border Patrol officers, and local law enforcement stood side by side outside the main operations center in El Paso. Most wore dark sunglasses to shield against the sun and the spotlight. Media vans from across the country were parked like dominoes, all awaiting one man. President Donald J. Trump. A black motorcade rumbled onto the tarmac near the center's helipad. As Air Force One touched down minutes later, the crowd grew tense. Trump emerged from the jet with Vice President JD Vance and ICE Director Tom Homan in tow. Behind them, dozens of agents lined up in support, their uniforms crisp, their expressions solemn. The president walked directly to the podium, flanked by American and Texas flags, ICE personnel standing firm on either side. He looked into the sea of cameras and didn't mince words. Yesterday, a man who's supposed to represent the people, Hakeem Jeffries, insulted every law enforcement officer in this country. Trump began. His voice was calm, but his words burned with intensity. He called our IC agents stormtroopers. He mocked their mission. He slandered their sacrifice. He paused. Well, let me be clear. Hakeem Jeffries doesn't speak for America. These men and women behind me, they do. The agents behind him nodded. Some clenched fists. Others shifted in their boots, swelling with the energy of public support they rarely received. Trump continued. They patrol the most dangerous parts of this country. They face down violent traffickers, rescue kidnapped children, and dismantle criminal networks. And they do it without fanfare, without political grandstanding. That's real courage. That's real patriotism. Applause erupted from both the agents and the crowd gathered beyond the press. Trump, sensing momentum, took it a step further. You know what Jeffries has done for this country? Trump scoffed. He's pushed for open borders, tied the hands of our agents, and now wants to defund the very people protecting our families. It's a disgrace. Trump then turned to Tom Homan, who stepped up to the microphone. I've buried agents. Homan began, voice gravelly with emotion. I've seen ICE officers break down doors to save little girls from traffickers. I've seen them take bullets in the line of duty. So when someone like Jeffries calls them stormtroopers, it's not just an insult. It's a betrayal. The media buzzed. CNN ran the headline within minutes. Trump, ICE slammed Jeffries in explosive El Paso speech. But it didn't stop there. Trump wasn't done with the fallout, not by a long shot. Later that evening, during a nationally televised town hall hosted by Fox News, President Trump revealed a series of executive actions and proposed legislation to be introduced with the backing of Republican leadership. First, the ICE Protection and Integrity Act, which would impose strict legal penalties for individuals, especially public officials, who knowingly spread false, slanderous, or demoralizing rhetoric about federal law. Enforcement personnel, if such speech results in real-world threats or harm to agents. Second, a funding expansion for ICE training, morale support, and family benefits, including $3 billion earmarked for field operations and mental health counseling for agents. Third, a full media campaign, dubbed #HonorTheShield, featuring real ICE agents sharing stories of their work, stories meant to combat the narrative Jeffries had tried to paint. Back in D.C., Hakeem Jeffries was reeling. His own press team scrambled to respond. At a hastily organized press conference, Jeffries attempted damage control. I want to clarify, my comments were directed at institutional practices, not individual agents, he claimed. I have deep respect for those serving in law enforcement, but we must have accountability. But the backlash was already fierce. Gold Star families of fallen ICE agents began publicly condemning Jeffries' remarks. One widow, Maria Lopez, whose husband had been killed during a cartel bust in San Antonio, stood in front of the Capitol with her young son and said, "My husband died a hero, and for Jeffries to call him a stormtrooper? No mother, no wife, no son should have to hear that." The video went viral. Millions watched. Twitter, now X, exploded with hashtags like #IStandWithICE and #JeffriesResign. Even some moderate Democrats distanced themselves, saying Jeffries had gone too far. And President Trump? He watched it all unfold, knowing full well that Jeffries had handed him something no amount of campaign spending could buy. A unifying symbol of law and order patriotism in an election year, Maria Lopez, the widow of ICE agent Carlos Lopez, stood at a candlelight vigil held in Phoenix, Arizona. Her voice trembled as she addressed the crowd, clutching a photo of her late husband in uniform. "My husband didn't die for politics," she said, voice cracking. "He died protecting a 7-year-old girl who had been trafficked across the border." He wore that IC badge with honor, not hate. The audience of hundreds, including ICE families, local police, and military veterans, stood in silence. Some wiped away tears. Others raised flags or placed candles near the steps of the memorial. Maria continued, her tone shifting to righteous anger. So when Hakeem Jeffries dares to compare IC agents to Nazis, he's spitting on my husband's grave. He owes every agent's family in this country a personal apology. Her speech went viral overnight. Clips were shared by conservative influencers, military veterans, and even several centrist Democrats. The growing chorus of criticism put serious pressure on Jeffries and a spotlight on the wider Democratic Party. Meanwhile, at the White House, President Trump and Vice President JD Vance were preparing for the next phase of their strategy. Vance, ever the tactician, knew this was more than a political flashpoint. It was a turning point. Hakeem underestimated the country's connection to law enforcement. Vance told Trump in the Situation Room. He thought he was scoring points with the base. But he forgot that people remember 9/11. They remember heroes in uniform. Trump nodded. I want him to feel this from every direction. I want Americans to see the faces behind those ICE badges. We've let the left shape this narrative for too long. Across the country, a new campaign launched. Branded Honor the Shield, it included high-production online videos, billboard placements in major cities, and coordinated social media efforts by ICE families and conservative groups. The ads featured emotional stories from agents. One clip showed Agent Rafael Mendez, who rescued a pregnant Honduran teenager from a stash house operated by MS-13. Another showed Agent Katie Sullivan, a mom of 3, who arrested a trafficker transporting fentanyl-laced candy near a school. Each clip ended with the tagline, ICE agents, real Americans, real heroes. The emotional impact was swift. Approval ratings for ICE surged 12% in a matter of days, according to a Rasmussen poll. And Hakeem Jeffries' favorability among independents dropped sharply, down 18% since his original press conference. Still, Jeffries refused to fully apologize. On MSNBC's Morning Brief, he stood his ground, though with noticeably more caution. There is a distinction, he said, between criticizing immigration policy and attacking agents personally. I regret if my words were interpreted as personal attacks. But it was too little, too late. President Trump, appearing on Fox and Friends Weekend, responded within hours. This guy talks out of both sides of his mouth, Trump said. First he calls ICE agents stormtroopers. Now he's playing the victim because America didn't like it. We don't need cowards in Congress. We need leaders who support law and order. Even more shocking came next. Trump leaned into the camera and smiled. And maybe it's time America sees what real leadership looks like. Maybe it's time we take back the House in 2026 and show Jeffries the door. At a Trump rally in Dallas, Texas, the crowd packed the American Airlines Center. Flags waved. Chants of USA, USA echoed off the rafters. Midway through his speech, Trump paused. I've invited someone special tonight, he said. Someone who's been on the front lines. Someone Hakeem Jeffries insulted. Give it up for ICE Special Agent Marcus Dean. The crowd erupted. Dean, a broad-shouldered man in a suit and tie, took the stage. He looked out at the roaring audience and raised his hand. I've been shot at, stabbed, and threatened, but I never thought the worst attack would come from a member of Congress. Dean said, voice firm. But let me tell you something. Your support, Mr. President, means everything. ICE won't back down. We protect America. That's what we do. ICE Special Agent Marcus Dean took the microphone, visibly moved by the reception. A 20-year veteran of the agency, Dean had served during 3 presidential administrations. He wasn't a politician. He was a field officer who had seen the darkest parts of the border crisis with his own eyes. I'm not a speaker, he began. I don't do TV. I don't write op-eds. I serve. The crowd applauded. I've walked into cartel bunkers. I've carried children out of shipping containers. I've lost friends. And I've never once thought about politics when I put on that badge. I just thought about doing what's right. He paused, taking a breath. So when I heard the minority leader of the US House compare people like me to Nazis, I'll admit, I was stunned. Then I got angry. But then I realized something. He doesn't know us. He doesn't know what we do. He's never seen the hell we walk into so that others don't have to. The arena had gone quiet, hanging on every word. He called us stormtroopers. Dean continued, his voice hardening. I've been shot at. I've pulled little girls out of sex rings run by animals. I've arrested rapists, murderers, drug lords. You don't have to agree with the president. You don't even have to agree with ICE. But you will not dehumanize the men and women who risk their lives every day to protect your family. By the time Dean finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye among the agents seated in the front rows. Even Trump appeared visibly moved. He embraced Dean and raised his arm high in the air like a victorious fighter. "This is what America looks like," Trump shouted. "Not Jeffries, not the radicals. It's patriots like Marcus Dean." Social media exploded. Hashtag Honor the Shield trended for 48 straight hours on X and Truth Social. Even moderate Democrats began calling Jeffries' comments unhelpful and a distraction. Meanwhile, new polling data from Real Clear Politics showed a stunning development. 73% of Americans said they were offended or deeply concerned by Jeffries' ICE remarks. Among independents, support for ICE had surged to an all-time high in swing states like Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada. Trump's favorability rating ticked up by 6 to 8 points following the rally. Behind closed doors, Democratic leadership was in chaos. An emergency DCCC conference call was held to assess the fallout. Party strategists were blunt. Jeffries' remarks had become a political liability, one that could cost them the House. Congresswoman Abigail Hawthorne, Democrat Pennsylvania, a centrist Democrat from a working-class district, reportedly confronted Jeffries on the call. "You handed Trump a gift," she shouted. "You think our constituents want ICE defunded? You've painted every Democrat with a target." Jeffries tried to defend himself, citing truth to power and systemic issues. But the damage was done. Several donors quietly withdrew commitments for Q3 funding, citing toxicity and poor message discipline. Meanwhile, President Trump was preparing for another move. With the American flag fluttering behind him, President Trump stood once more in front of the press. This time, he wasn't flanked by agents. He was surrounded by ICE families, widows, spouses, children holding up pictures of fallen heroes. Today, Trump began, "We are not just defending ICE. We are honoring the legacy of every brave American who gave their life protecting this nation's borders." He turned to Maria Lopez, the widow from Phoenix. "Maria, your husband is not forgotten. Your children will grow up knowing their father was a hero. And I'm proud to tell you, we are posthumously awarding Agent Carlos Lopez the Presidential Medal of Valor." Gasps and applause rippled through the press corps. The president wasn't just defending ICE now. He was immortalizing their sacrifice. And he wasn't finished yet. "We are also opening a new training and memorial center in Texas. It will bear the names of every ICE agent who has fallen in the line of duty. Let the world see that we do not hide from the truth. We honor it." Back in New York, Hakeem Jeffries watched the Rose Garden address in silence. His staff frantically worked on a new statement, one that might help ease the storm. But even he knew, deep down, that the moment he uttered the word stormtroopers, the tide had turned, and Trump had made him regret everything. Gasps and tears filled the Rose Garden as Maria Lopez broke down in President Trump's embrace. Cameras captured the emotional moment live, broadcasting it to millions of homes across America. Trump handed her a polished plaque inscribed with Agent Carlos Lopez's name and the words, "For courage beyond the line of duty." As the applause died down, Trump turned back to the podium. "There was a time when honoring our law enforcement wasn't controversial. A time when words like hero weren't mocked by politicians sitting in air-conditioned offices," he said, glancing toward the Capitol in the distance. "But now we have leaders who treat ICE like villains, who paint border agents as monsters. And they do it for applause on social media. They've forgotten who they serve. Well, I haven't. JD Vance hasn't. And America hasn't." Vice President Vance stepped forward and added, "This is a moment of clarity for our country. We're either going to support those who risk everything for our safety, or we're going to let radicals rewrite reality. By midweek, the political consequences began to unfold like falling dominoes. A bipartisan resolution condemning defamatory rhetoric against federal law enforcement personnel passed the Senate with surprising support from 3 moderate Democrats. The House, in an unexpected blow to Jeffries' leadership, delayed their response vote amid internal backlash. Meanwhile, Jeffries' office released a revised statement late Tuesday night. While I stand by my commitment to justice and reform, I deeply regret the language used in my prior statement regarding ICE agents. My intent was never to diminish the service and sacrifice of any officer who risks their life for our country. I apologize to any and all families impacted. But the public was unmoved. His apology, widely seen as damage control, lacked the emotional weight and authenticity of Maria Lopez's plea or Agent Marcus Dean's fiery speech. Conservative media kept up the pressure. Fox News, Newsmax, and the Daily Wire ran daily segments highlighting stories of ICE agents saving lives. Hashtag Jeffries regrets and hashtag Honor the Shield remained top trending hashtags for days in towns across America. Especially in the Midwest and the South, something began to stir. Rallies in support of ICE popped up in over 40 cities. One in Grand Rapids, Michigan, drew more than 10,000 attendees waving flags, holding pictures of ICE agents, and chanting, "We back the badge." Conservative PACs seized the moment. Ads blanketed the airwaves, showing a split screen. On the left, Jeffries mocking ICE. On the right, families of fallen agents standing in silence in a powerful moment. A viral video showed a young boy named Eli, Agent Carlos Lopez's son, saluting his father's photo while saying, "My daddy was not a stormtrooper. He was a superhero." The video racked up over 20 million views in a single day. On Friday, President Trump delivered one last policy hammer. From the Oval Office, with Vice President JD Vance and House conservatives flanking him, he signed the SHIELD Act into law, a sweeping bill providing $5 billion in additional funding for ICE and Border Patrol, full tuition assistance for agents' families, mental health resources, and national recognition for acts of heroism in the field. This act will make sure no agent ever feels forgotten, no widow ever feels abandoned, and no politician will ever again slander our protectors without consequence. Trump declared, pen in hand. JD Vance added, "We are sending a clear message to Washington elites. Americans stand with those who stand on the line." The fallout spilled directly into the 2026 midterms. 3 House Democrats in swing districts distanced themselves from Jeffries' leadership. One even defected to the GOP. Quiet grumblings among House Democrats began to bubble into full-blown whispers about replacing Jeffries as minority leader before the year's end. Republicans launched their new campaign slogan, "Real Leaders, Real Borders, Real America." Trump's approval hit 53%, his highest since 2019, and fundraising totals shattered previous records. ICE agents began appearing in GOP ads, with Agent Marcus Dean's speech serving as the cornerstone of an entire ad campaign called "This is Who They Mocked." In El Paso, a new ICE training center was built and named in honor of Agent Carlos Lopez. The plaque read, "In service of the truth and in defense of the defenseless." At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, President Trump stood once again with Maria Lopez and her children. The crowd cheered as Eli Lopez stepped to the podium and saluted. "My dad was proud to be an American," he said with a brave smile. "And now I am too." In mocking the very agents who upheld the law, Hakeem Jeffries hadn't just insulted a profession. He had underestimated a nation's heartbeat. One that still believed in duty, in sacrifice, and in honor. And thanks to one moment of arrogance, President Trump had reminded America exactly who the real patriots were.